when the inhabitants of Mars were no longer able to deny the warming of their planet and scale of destruction to come. As the astronomer Percival Lowell first observed in 1894, and soon after started publishing in science journals, popular magazines and newspapers, in a last desperate attempt to save their advanced civilizations, the citizens of Mars came up with ambitious geoengineering projects. Planetary warming and aridification was so severe, Lowell argued, that Martians were forced to construct immense canals to direct seasonal snowmelt from the polar caps to the regions scorched by heat waves, where life was becoming unsustainable and inhabitants had started dying from the intense heat and drought. They'd hoped that melted ice would produce enough water to support at least another generation. No one knew for sure. When Lowell's colleagues showed doubt about his theory, the acclaimed astronomer used maps and drawings he'd made of the red planet with the aid of his new telescope to compare Martian landforms to Earth's human-made rail networks, irrigation systems, and street patterns. The resemblance and geometric regularity were evident. His cartographic images conveyed authority and legitimacy for the inhabited Mars hypothesis. As an icon, the image of Mars with geometric patterns stood for intelligence and civilization, but also proposed the existence of a technological power so advanced it could alter the geology of an entire planet and change its climate. Not unlike the story of our own planet then. This was the last heroic attempt of a civilization to save itself. Lowell continued the work of reinforcing the certainty of civilization on the red planet until his death in 1916. This triggered off our fascination specifically with this planet, which endures to this day and fuels the imaginary of interplanetary techno-colonial expeditions. It was not until 2003, however, that the retired optometrist Sherman Schultz observed that the modifications Lowell had made to his telescope turned it into a tool similar to that used to detect eye cataracts. The tool Lowell thought offered a clearer image of the planet he was observing, in fact, cast shadows of his own blood vessels and eye floaters, making them visible when he was observing the sky. He had accidentally inverted the instrument designed to look further from his eyes and was looking at what lay closest to them. As a consequence, his maps of the planet of an advanced yet dying civilization were also maps of his own vision and its imperfections. Several decades later, the composer John Cage came, curiously, to an analogous realization through his ears when he visited an anechoic chamber and in listening out for the sound of silence, he heard his own pulse and nervous system. When we observe the world around us, we often forget to acknowledge that we are part of it as well, immersed and already entangled within it, affecting it as well as being affected by it. Lowell, Cage, you, me, all of us are part of our environment. We are the environment. We are the weather. Each breath contributing to the atmosphere, each action producing carbon dioxide, hanging around between 300 and 1,000 years, making changes in our skies and earth that will endure on the timescale of the next generation, and the one after them, and the one after them, for approximately 35 consecutive human lives. In 2019, I happened to be near the City of London's financial district to meet a group of young university students with whom I was developing a film project. During the session, the group announced to me that they would not be able to attend the afternoon meeting because they were going on strike, a climate protest and a march through the city. They invited me, I joined. To a visitor, this district is perceived as the headquarters of neoliberal capitalism, a tense surveillance panopticon and a place of financial privilege servicing banks and insurance companies, multinational corporations and wealthy individuals. But while the area attracts ambitious professionals who service a system that still relies on an unsustainable level of exploitation of our planet, there are strong currents of resistance. The student protest started with a gathering in an open-air car park where groups of children, teenagers, young adults and journalists began to congregate. Young people with fluorescent face paint and improvised placards crowded the area, rehearsing chants and slogans about the seas and the oceans, the fish and the animals, the air and the soil. An hour later, the crowd streamed in the thousands down the main streets of the city, immobilizing traffic and bewildering adult onlookers. The city centre transformed into an amphitheatre for a flood of chants, cries, slogans, whistles, and an interplay of call and response between different sections of the demonstrators. Standing there, in the middle of all this, I felt both pressed by the noise vibrations of young voices and expanded by the radiating resonances with my voice somewhere in the middle of the sound mix. Then suddenly, we came to a pause. All noise ceased, and everyone sat on the street. Far behind me, I heard a distant, rising cacophony. A rogue wave of vocal noise with no words, no slogans, no message. Noise was our message. It surged forward like a raging tempest, a tidal wave, an unstoppable sonic tsunami. It was rushing toward me, and I was panic-stricken. As the noise went through and over me, it vibrated every cell in my body, filling me with terror and with joy. Like a musical instrument in an orchestra, my body was being tuned into a new neutral pitch, a communally shared vibration, an urgent frequency. It washed through and past me, and then it reached the edge of the sea of people in front of me. It bounced back like a wave meeting an obstacle, turning back, spreading yet another vast ripple of noise in the opposite direction toward the other end of the people's sea, the other end of the city centre. This was a sonic rite of passage. Right there and then, I felt the safest I'd ever been in a storm at sea. It was where I wanted to be, and drift with the impulses of the young current toward a destination I didn't exactly know, but which by now I completely trusted. Every time the chants yelled the word crisis, they also said decision. I meditated on the fact that, myself being at least twice the average age of the rest of the protesters, I must decide what will grow in my place. Will it be a compensation or a revenge? Will it be enabling or inhibiting? Our decisions now will go far beyond how future generations will evaluate us. They will determine whether they will exist to evaluate us at all. The author Jonathan Safran Foer writes that it is not enough to say that we want more life, we must refuse to stop saying it. Continuing environmentally detrimental practices is like writing a suicide note. But as Foer notes, suicide notes are written once. Life notes must always be written. By having honest conversations, bridging the familiar with the unfamiliar, planting messages for the future, digging up messages from the past, digging up messages from the future, refusing to stop. Although there is a temptation to describe the planetary crisis in apocalyptic terms, imagining dystopias and human extinction, the truth is that those living in high-income and high-tech nations will probably survive a climate suicide, but we will suffer permanent injuries. The COVID-19 pandemic is just one of many anthropogenic environmental calamities and a symptom of our unbalanced relationship with all that surrounds us. Rational statistics and academic lists of the catastrophic societal effects of climate change are one thing. Our changed psychologies by the traumas of environmental calamities another thing. And yet another is competing for resources, whichever each crisis demands. Be they masks, sanitizers, vaccines, water. Competition takes forms that are increasingly more explicit, divisive, louder. Listening plunges us into our known experiences and entanglements with one another and with the world. Listening is not a passive experience. It doesn't just happen to us. Listening is an action. When I listen, I choose to direct my attention to an other. So when I listen, the I becomes the we. And I don't only mean listening with my ears, but my entire body receiving, sensing the other. I mean listening as a way of thinking, as an attitude, as a way of being. As such, listening is relational and generates a common, the listening space. In this respect, listening is like love, in that love directs one toward another and generates something that didn't exist before. Relations, alliances, empathies, affections, solidarities. When we choose to listen to one another, we produce a new common, new collectivities, a new social order, a new life, a new world. In this respect, then, listening is a generative force. This is where we may look for political agency, not as something that one owns, but as that which emerges through listening to one another. Mutual listening holds the potential to spirit new forms of care, emancipation, and social solidarity. Gaining momentum by creating an acoustics of assembly, of common purpose and imaginative resistance, like the youth protest I was in. To listen beyond what appears requires additional thinking and acting. It requires actions aligned with the non-human, with blind spots and the occluded, the underground or the dismissed. It demands of us to search for positions of vulnerability, so that our work can enable not a speaking on behalf of the dispossessed or the non-human, but a deepening of recognition and a ferocious love. A love with a passion and an instinct to sustain all life. A love that is not necessarily friendly. It has an intimidating power and a challenge. It has an unspeakable hope. A hope that comes from tuning into one another, that prompts transformations. And a mode of listening that nurtures everyday practices of critical attention and tenderness.